The gentle sea breeze swept across Ella Thompson's golden hair as she sat silently on the warm sand, watching her 6-year-old daughter, Lila. The little girl's delicate fingers traced perfect circles in the sand, her eyes downcast, holding a sadness that no child should bear. Ella sighed, feeling the familiar weight of helplessness as she observed her daughter's silent world. A man and his young son walked along the shore, their laughter carried by the wind. The father glanced over, noticing Lila's concentration. He paused, then moved his hands in deliberate motions, signing to her. Lila froze, her eyes widening in surprise. Slowly, her lips curved upward into a smile, the first genuine smile Ella had seen in months. The mother's heart stopped, witnessing this unexpected miracle unfold before her eyes. Ella Thompson had built her life around structure and success. At 35, she was the CEO of a thriving tech company with a corner office overlooking the city skyline and a team of 50 employees who both respected and feared her decisive leadership. Her schedule was meticulously planned, her wardrobe impeccably tailored, her home magazine perfect. Yet, behind closed doors, all these accomplishments felt hollow in the face of her greatest challenge: connecting with her own daughter. 3 years ago, her world had shattered when her husband David died in a car accident, leaving her alone to raise their daughter. Lila had been born unable to speak, diagnosed with congenital vocal cord paralysis. The specialists had explained it wasn't uncommon, but for Ella, it felt like a problem she couldn't solve with her usual determination. She'd hired the best specialists, purchased the most advanced communication devices, enrolled Lila in exclusive schools for children with special needs. Yet none of these efforts had breached the emotional distance growing between them. Their weekend beach trips had become a ritual, the only place where Ella felt Lila seemed marginally happier, free from the constraints of their carefully ordered home. Here, the little girl would sit for hours, watching waves and drawing patterns in the sand, her honey blonde hair, so like her mother's, dancing in the breeze. Ella would bring her work, stealing glances at her daughter, wishing she knew what thoughts moved behind those expressive blue eyes. Jack Miller's life couldn't have been more different. At 38, the former sign language teacher had abandoned his career in New York after his wife Rachel's death from breast cancer 2 years earlier. Unable to face their empty apartment filled with memories, he'd packed what little they owned into his weathered SUV and hit the road with his 5-year-old son, Noah. They'd traveled down the East Coast, settling temporarily in beach towns where Jack sold handcrafted jewelry and souvenirs to tourists. The modest income was enough for their simple needs: a small rental, healthy food, and occasional educational materials for Noah. Jack had taught at a school for deaf children, his passion for sign language ignited during college when his roommate was hearing impaired. After Rachel died, he'd made sure Noah maintained both verbal language and sign language skills, a connection to the mother who had signed bedtime stories even from her hospital bed. Unlike Ella's structured approach to parenting, Jack embraced spontaneity. His parenting philosophy was built on emotional connection rather than achievement. Their nomadic lifestyle, while financially modest, was rich with shared experiences and genuine communication. The two families could not have been more opposite, one cushioned by wealth but emotionally distant, the other lacking material comforts but bonded by deep understanding. When Jack noticed the little girl sitting alone on the sand, something about her concentrated solitude reminded him of many children he'd taught. Isolated by their inability to communicate in a world designed for speech, Noah ran ahead of his father, plopping down beside Lila with the easy confidence of a child who hadn't yet learned to fear rejection. He began drawing his own shapes in the sand, stars and squiggly lines that intersected with Lila's perfect circles. The little girl glanced up, startled by the intrusion, but didn't move away. Jack approached slowly, careful not to seem threatening. He knelt down several feet away, observing the children's silent interaction. When Lila didn't respond verbally to Noah's cheerful chatter about his sand drawing, Jack's teacher instincts kicked in. He raised his hands and signed a simple greeting. "Hello. My name is Jack. What's your name?" Ella watched from her beach chair, immediately alert as the stranger approached her daughter. She was halfway to her feet when she saw his hands moving in that distinctive way. Lila's reaction froze her in place. The little girl's face transformed with recognition, her hands hesitantly forming a response. clumsy but deliberate motions that Ella had never seen before. "You know sign language?" Jack asked, his hands forming the words as he spoke them aloud. Lila nodded, her fingers moving again, slowly, uncertainly, but unmistakably communicating. "Just a little." Jack translated for Ella's benefit as she approached. "She says she learned from videos." Ella stood speechless, her designer sunglasses hiding the shock in her eyes. I didn't know she could do that." Jack smiled gently. "Kids are full of surprises. I'm Jack, by the way. This little hurricane is my son, Noah. I'm Ella. This is Lila." Her voice carried the polished confidence of a business executive, though her hands gripped her beach wrap tightly. "You're very good with sign language. I used to teach it, back in New York." Jack signed as he spoke, including Lila in the conversation. Noah had already returned to his sand art, now showing Lila how to draw a proper starfish. "Would you like to join us?" Ella gestured to her large beach umbrella, surprising herself with the invitation. "There's plenty of shade." Jack hesitated, then nodded. "That would be nice. The sun's getting pretty strong." They settled under the umbrella, an awkward tableau. Ella perched on her lounge chair, Jack cross-legged on her beach blanket, the children playing nearby. The conversation started haltingly, focusing on the weather, the beach, safe topics that required no vulnerability. "How long has Lila been unable to speak?" Jack finally asked, his tone professional, not pitying. "Since birth. Vocal cord paralysis." Ella's response was clipped. "Practiced from years of explaining to doctors, teachers, and well-meaning acquaintances. And you never learned to sign with her?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. In her world of corporate diplomacy, few people spoke so bluntly. "I hired specialists. They recommended vocal therapy, electronic communication devices. Sign language was presented as a last resort." Jack nodded, watching Lila. Different approaches work for different kids. But sometimes, the simplest connection is through our hands. He demonstrated a few basic signs. "This is mother. This is love. This is ocean." Ella watched, mesmerized by the grace of his movements. She hadn't realized sign language could be so expressive, almost like a dance. "I don't know how to talk to my own child," she admitted, the words escaping before she could contain them. The vulnerability in her voice surprised them both. Jack looked at her with understanding rather than judgment. "But you want to. That's the most important first step." As the morning sun climbed higher, Ella found herself inviting Jack and Noah to join them for lunch at a nearby seafood restaurant. The beachside eatery was casual but upscale, with an open-air patio overlooking the ocean. Ella normally avoided such public outings with Lila, tired of the sympathetic glances when people realized her daughter couldn't speak. But today felt different. Seated around a driftwood table, the children sipped colorful fruit smoothies, while Jack taught Ella basic signs. "Please. Thank you. More." Noah and Lila conversed in their own way, a mix of signs, drawings on paper placemats, and expressive faces. Lila's eyes sparkled with an animation Ella hadn't seen in years, if ever. "She's really quite good," Jack observed. "She must have been studying those videos diligently." Ella nodded, a complex emotion tightening her throat. Pride in her daughter's initiative mingled with shame at her own failure to notice. And beneath it all, a stinging hurt that Lila had connected so easily with strangers. "I should have known," she murmured. "I should have seen she wanted this." Jack's expression softened. "We all do the best we can with what we know at the time." He shared his own story then. How he discovered sign language in college, his years teaching, and how he'd left it all after Rachel died of cancer. "I couldn't stay in that apartment." Walking past her favorite coffee shop, the park where she'd push Noah on the swings, his hands fidgeted with a paper napkin, "So we just two left. Been traveling ever since. Selling crafts. Picking up odd jobs." Ella studied him with new eyes. This man with worn jeans and calloused hands who possessed a patience and emotional intelligence she'd never mastered despite her MBA and executive coaching. She thought of all the nights she'd worked late, leaving Lila with nannies, believing she was building security for their future. Had she been missing what truly mattered all along? It must be difficult, she said, moving from place to place. Jack shrugged. Sometimes. But we're together. That's what counts. He glanced at Noah, who was teaching Lila how to fold the paper placemat into an origami boat. Kids are resilient when they feel loved and heard. The words lingered in Ella's mind long after lunch ended. Loved, yes. She loved Lila fiercely. But heard? How could she hear a child who couldn't speak, whose inner world she'd never accessed? The realization that she'd failed her daughter in such a fundamental way gnawed at her, even as they returned to the beach for the afternoon. Back on the sand, Jack produced a simple kite kit from his beach bag. Anyone up for some flying? The children bounced with excitement while he laid out the supplies. Colored paper, thin wooden sticks, string, and tape. I haven't made a kite since I was a kid, Ella admitted, kneeling on the beach blanket. It's like riding a bike, Jack assured her. Your hands remember. They work together. Adults helping children. The atmosphere relaxed and playful. Ella found herself laughing at Noah's jokes, her professional facade dissolving in the sea air. When Lila struggled with taping her kite's cross supports, Ella moved to help. To her surprise, her daughter reached for her hand first, her small fingers wrapping around Ella's wrist. Then Lila's other hand moved in deliberate motions. I love you, Mom. Ella froze, her vision suddenly blurred with tears. Jack, noticing the moment, translated softly. She said she loves you. A sob caught in Ella's throat as she pulled Lila into her arms, holding her close. All this time, she'd interpreted her daughter's silence as emotional distance, never understanding that Lila had feelings she simply couldn't express in ways Ella recognized. I love you too, baby. So much, she whispered into her daughter's hair. Jack discreetly gave them space, focusing on helping Noah with his kite. When Ella had composed herself, he approached with a gentle smile. Want to learn a few more signs? Useful ones for kite flying? For the next hour, he taught her basics. Up, down, beautiful, careful. Ella absorbed each one eagerly, her executive's mind accustomed to quick learning. Lila watched with wide eyes as her mother signed to her, responding with enthusiastic nods and signs of her own. Their kites eventually soared high above the beach. Noah's red diamond, Lila's blue triangle, and a larger yellow one the adults had made together. When the wind shifted unexpectedly, tangling the strings, they all collapsed in laughter on the sand. Let's build a sand castle, Noah suggested, already digging with his plastic shovel. Soon they were all involved, constructing an elaborate fortress with moats and towers. Ella's designer swimsuit was smeared with wet sand, her manicured nails packed with grit, but she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so present, so unburdened by responsibilities and expectations. Lila's face was transformed, her eyes crinkling at the corners when she smiled, a silent laugh that spoke volumes. As they added seashell decorations to their castle walls, Ella realized this moment of connection was healing something in her too. She had built her identity around being strong, capable, independent, the woman who needed no one. Yet here she was, being rescued by a wandering beach vendor and his son, learning that true strength might lie in vulnerability after all. As the afternoon light mellowed into early evening, Ella found herself reluctant for the day to end. Our house isn't far from here, she said impulsively. Would you like to come over for dinner? It's the least I can do to thank you for today. Jack hesitated, glancing at his sand-covered son. We're not exactly dressed for a visit. Ella laughed. Neither are we. Please, I insist. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the circular driveway of Ella's beachfront mansion. She saw Jack's eyes widen slightly at the scale of the property. 6,000 square feet of modern architecture. Floor-to-ceiling windows, manicured gardens with a swimming pool overlooking the ocean. It was a testament to her professional success, the fortress she'd built for herself and Lila after David's death. Wow, Noah whispered. Your house is like a hotel. Ella smiled, suddenly seeing her home through their eyes. Beautiful, but perhaps intimidating in its perfection. She led them through glass doors to the terrace, where Lila was already pulling Noah toward her outdoor playhouse. The children disappeared inside, their excited movements visible through the playhouse windows. "Can I get you something to drink?" Ella offered Jack. "Water, beer, wine?" "Water's fine." He stood awkwardly by the edge of the pool, hands in his pockets. Ella returned with drinks, noticing how out of place Jack seemed amid the luxury surrounding them. His tan skin contrasted with the white designer furniture, his casual clothes at odds with the curated aesthetic of the space. Yet his eyes reflected the same warmth they'd shown at the beach, his smile genuine despite his obvious discomfort. "Your home is beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. It's more house than we need, honestly." Ella sipped her wine. "David, my husband, he was in real estate development. He bought this place before." She left the sentence unfinished. Jack nodded in understanding. "It's hard, isn't it? Living with the plans you made together, when suddenly it's just you making all the decisions." "Exactly." Ella rarely found someone who truly understood the complexity of grief, the way it lingered years after the initial shock. "The hardest part is knowing what's best for Lila. I keep thinking David would know better than I do." "I doubt that's true," Jack said. "You're a good mother, Ella. You're trying." His words touched a tender place inside her. When was the last time anyone had told her she was doing well as a mother? In the corporate world, she received constant feedback, performance reviews, metrics of success. But parenthood offered no such clarity, especially with a child she struggled to understand. "If I hadn't met you today," she wondered aloud, "would I ever have discovered how to communicate with her? Would I have missed this connection forever?" Jack watched the children playing. "You'd have found your way eventually. Love always does." Ella studied his profile. This man who spoke of emotions with such ease. "Would you consider? I mean, I could hire you to teach us both. Sign language, I mean. You're clearly excellent at it. And Lila responds to you." The offer hung between them, clearly unexpected. Jack's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for employment. Especially not." "Not what?" Ella pressed. He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "This isn't my world, Ella. Noah and we're just passing through." Before she could respond, the children raced back to them, Noah clutching a toy airplane Lila had given him. "Mom," he called to Ella, then immediately looked mortified. "I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to call you Mom." Ella's heart constricted at the slip. How lonely the boy must be for a maternal figure. How confusing to navigate childhood without his mother. "It's okay, Noah. I don't mind at all." Over dinner on the terrace, grilled fish and vegetables prepared by Ella's housekeeper, the conversation flowed more easily. As darkness fell, the pool lights cast a blue glow across their faces, and strings of garden lights twinkled like earthbound stars. By the time they said goodbye, exchanging phone numbers just in case, something had shifted between them. A fragile connection neither was quite ready to name. 3 days later, Ella found herself driving to the beach again, alone this time. She'd left Lila with her nanny, claiming a business meeting, though her calendar was clear. In the passenger seat lay a sign language book she'd ordered with overnight shipping. The evening air was cool as she walked along the shore, scanning the small collection of vendor carts. She found Jack's stand just as he was packing up for the day, a weathered table displaying handmade jewelry and small wooden toys. He looked up in surprise. "Ella, is everything okay? Where's Lila?" "She's at home," Ella replied, suddenly uncertain why she'd come. She held up the book awkwardly. "I wanted to learn, to understand my daughter, and to understand you." In the fading light, Jack's expression softened. He set down the necklace he'd been wrapping, his movements deliberate, as if buying time to process her words. "I'm not that complicated," he said finally. "I think you are." Ella stepped closer. "You lost your wife. You gave up your career. You're raising your son alone. just like I'm raising Lila. But you seem so at peace with it all. Jack laughed, though the sound held little humor. Trust me, I'm not. I'm terrified most days. Afraid I'm failing Noah. Afraid we'll never feel stable again. He ran a hand through his hair. I just hide it better than most. Why did you really leave New York? Ella asked. Sensing there was more to his story, Jack was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon where the last light was fading. After Rachel died, I couldn't afford our apartment anymore. Her medical bills. He shrugged. I sold everything, paid what I could. The school was understanding, but they needed someone reliable. Not a single dad having panic attacks in the supply closet. The vulnerability in his admission moved her. This wasn't the carefree nomad she'd imagined, but a man carrying burdens perhaps as heavy as her own. I'm sorry, she said softly. That must have been incredibly difficult. It still is. He met her eyes directly. I worry about being the poor dad at school functions, about Noah feeling different from kids who have two parents and stable homes. I worry about money constantly, about being enough for him. Ella stepped closer, the sign language book still clutched to her chest like a shield. You are enough. I saw how Noah looks at you. He adores you. Jack's smile was tinged with sadness. Kids are forgiving that way. He gestured to the book. So you're really going to learn? Yes. Ella's voice was firm. Will you help me? Not as a job, but as a... She hesitated, unsure what to call this fragile connection between them. As a friend? Jack supplied, the word somehow inadequate yet accurate. Ella nodded, then raised her hands, carefully forming the signs she'd memorized from the first chapter of the book. Thank you for helping my daughter smile. Jack's eyes widened in surprise, then warmed with appreciation for her effort. Without thinking, Ella stepped forward and hugged him, a spontaneous gesture so unlike her usually reserved manner. His arms encircled her after a moment of surprise, strong and secure. The embrace lasted only seconds, but when they pulled apart, both seemed equally startled by the surge of electricity between them. I should go, Ella said, suddenly acutely aware they were standing on a public beach, the last sunlight long faded. Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. We'll be here this weekend. Same spot as before. If you and Lila want to join us. We'd like that, Ella replied, already knowing she would rearrange any commitment to make it happen. The following weeks fell into a new pattern. Every Saturday, the four of them met at the beach, building sand castles, flying kites, exploring tide pools. Each Sunday, Jack would come to Ella's house, ostensibly to continue their sign language lessons around her pool. The children would play while Jack patiently corrected Ella's finger positions and taught her new vocabulary. Ella practiced diligently each night, after putting Lila to bed, her hands moving through the silent alphabet, simple phrases, and eventually more complex expressions. Her progress was remarkable, driven by the same determination that had propelled her through business school and up the corporate ladder. More remarkable still was Lila's transformation. The formerly withdrawn child now greeted each day with enthusiasm, her hands constantly moving, expressing thoughts and feelings Ella had never known she harbored. One particularly beautiful afternoon, Lila presented Jack with a gift, a bracelet made of woven beach grass and small shells. Her hands moved gracefully as she explained, "Thank you for helping my mom smile." Ella, watching from nearby, felt tears spring to her eyes. Her daughter had noticed the change in her too. The way laughter came more easily now, the loosening of her perpetually rigid shoulders, the genuine smile that had replaced her professional mask. Jack accepted the bracelet with appropriate solemnity, slipping it over his wrist with a bow of thanks. Watching him with Lila, Ella felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer Sunday. He treated her daughter with such natural respect, neither condescending nor pitying. With Jack, Lila was simply Lila, a bright, creative child with her own way of communicating. Noah had blossomed too, the boy's natural exuberance finding perfect expression in their weekly adventures. He'd taken to calling Ella Miss Ella with careful precision after his earlier slip, though sometimes she caught him watching her with a wistfulness that suggested he still longed for a maternal figure in his life. On a warm July afternoon, their peaceful routine was disrupted. Lila, running too quickly across wet rocks, slipped and fell. It wasn't a serious injury, just a scraped knee, but her silent tears were heart-wrenching. Before Ella could even reach her, Jack was there, kneeling beside Lila, his hands moving in gentle signs. "It's okay to cry. Brave people feel pain too. You're doing great." Lila's tears slowed as she focused on his hands, her own rising to respond. By the time Ella reached them with the first aid kit she always carried, Lila was actually smiling through her tears. Ella stood motionless, watching this man comfort her child with such intuitive understanding. Something shifted inside her, a recognition too powerful to deny. "Maybe," she whispered, more to herself than to Jack. "We're already a family." The words hung in the salt-laden air between them. Unacknowledged, but unmistakable. Their comfortable routine continued through the summer, each week bringing them closer. Ella found herself sharing confidences she'd never voiced aloud. Her fears about raising Lila alone, the crushing loneliness of her supposedly enviable life, her doubts about whether her corporate success meant anything if she couldn't communicate with her own child. Jack reciprocated with his own truths, his financial anxieties, his guilt about Noah's unstable childhood, his fear of staying in one place too long and having to truly face his grief. Between sandcastle competitions and swimming lessons, they were building something neither had expected to find again: trust. By late August, as summer families began returning to their inland homes and schools prepared to reopen, a subtle tension crept into their gatherings. Jack grew quieter, sometimes lost in thought while watching the children play. Ella sensed something was changing but was afraid to ask, afraid to hear that their idyllic summer was coming to its inevitable end. The revelation came on a Tuesday evening, when Jack called instead of texting as was their usual habit. His voice sounded strained, hesitant. "I've been offered a job," he said without preamble. "In Ohio, teaching at a school for deaf children again." Ella's heart plummeted, though she forced her voice to remain steady. "That's wonderful. It's what you're meant to do." "It's a good opportunity," Jack agreed. "Stable income, benefits for Noah. A chance to get back to work I believe in." "When would you leave?" Ella asked, dreading the answer. "Next week. The school year's about to start." His voice softened. "Ella, I never meant for this summer to become so complicated." "Neither did I," she admitted, thinking of all the ways her life had transformed since that first day on the beach. How could she return to her former existence now, knowing what connection truly felt like? How could she explain to Lila that the people who had helped her find her voice were disappearing? "We'll keep in touch," Jack promised. The words hollow, with the knowledge that distance would inevitably change whatever had grown between them. Ella said all the right things. Congratulations, best wishes, promises to call. But after hanging up, she sat in her perfectly appointed living room and wept for the first time since David's funeral. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normality. Ella didn't tell Lila immediately, unable to bear her daughter's reaction. But children were perceptive, and Lila sensed something was wrong. She grew quieter, her hands still, her eyes watchful. When Ella finally explained using the signs they'd practiced all summer, Lila's face crumpled in silent anguish. That night, she refused dinner, curling on her bed with a framed photo of the four of them at the beach. On her small whiteboard, she'd written in careful letters, "I miss Jack." The day before their planned departure, Jack brought Noah to say goodbye. They met on the beach where it had all begun. The September air cooler now. The tourist crowds thinned to locals and retirees. The children played at the shore's edge, while Ella and Jack sat awkwardly on her beach blanket, a careful distance between them. "Noah's excited about the new school," Jack said, filling the silence. "They have a good music program. He wants to learn piano." Ella nodded, her throat tight. "Lila hasn't been eating well since I told her." Jack's face reflected her pain. "This is why I don't usually—" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "Get involved. It's easier when it's just the two of us." "Is it really?" Ella challenged gently. "Easier? or just safer? Before he could answer, Lila came running up the beach toward them, her face streaked with tears. She threw herself into Jack's arms, her small hands moving frantically. "Don't go. Please don't go. We need you." Jack held her gently, his own hands signing back reassurances. "We'll visit. We'll video call. You can show me everything you're learning." Lila shook her head vehemently, continuing to sign with increasing distress. Ella watched, her heart breaking for her daughter, who had finally found her voice only to lose the person who best understood it. With sudden clarity, Ella knew what she needed to do. She stood up, her hands moving with deliberate precision in the signs she'd practiced for weeks. "Stay with us." Jack looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and hope. "Ella, you don't have to." "I'm not asking out of obligation," she interrupted. "I'm asking because when you're gone, there will be a Jack-shaped hole in our lives. Because Lila smiles when you're here. Because I've spent 3 years building a beautiful cage for us. And you showed me the door was open all along." Noah had joined them now, standing beside his father with questioning eyes. Jack looked from Ella to the children, then out to the horizon, where sky met ocean. "My job," he began. "There's a school for deaf children 20 minutes from here," Ella said. "I checked. They're always looking for qualified teachers." Jack's surprised laugh held equal parts wonder and caution. "You've thought this through. I'm a CEO. It's what I do." Ella knelt in the sand beside him, no longer caring about her designer sundress. "I'm not asking you to move in or make promises. I'm just asking you to stay in our lives while we figure out what this is." Lila and Noah watched with matching expressions of hope as Jack considered Ella's words. Finally, his hand reached for hers, their fingers interlacing in the warm sand. The children erupted in silent celebration, Lila's hands moving too quickly to follow, Noah jumping with unrestrained joy. Jack didn't accept the teaching job immediately. Instead, he found an affordable apartment nearby, continuing to sell his crafts while exploring local opportunities. But he was at Ella's house almost daily, for dinner, for sign language practice, for weekend barbecues by the pool. The transition was gradual, organic, neither of them willing to rush what was building between them. By October, Jack had accepted a position at the school for children with special needs, where his expertise in sign language was highly valued. His natural teaching abilities quickly made him a favorite among students and parents alike. When the school hosted an open house, Ella attended proudly at his side, watching him in his element with undisguised admiration. Lila transferred to the same school in November, blossoming in an environment where her form of communication was not just accommodated but celebrated. She made friends quickly, her natural creativity and intelligence finding full expression now that language barriers had fallen away. Each evening, she would eagerly show Ella new signs she'd learned, the two of them practicing together. Noah entered the local public school, where he quickly became known for teaching his classmates basic sign language during recess. He spent weekends at Ella's house, his own room gradually accumulating toys, books, and artwork. If anyone found their arrangement unusual, neither Ella nor Jack particularly cared. In December, Ella organized a community workshop called Wordless Connection, inviting parents of nonverbal children to learn basic sign language in a supportive environment. Jack led the training, his gentle teaching style putting nervous parents at ease. At the end of the session, Lila took the stage, her hands moving confidently as she addressed the group. "Thank you for learning with us. When you learn to sign, you show your love." Ella, watching from the sidelines, felt a pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This confident child, expressing herself eloquently before a room full of strangers, was worlds away from the withdrawn little girl who had traced silent circles in the sand just months ago. As winter yielded to spring, the four of them settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly like family. Though Jack maintained his separate apartment, he spent most nights at Ella's house, reading bedtime stories to both children, spoken for Noah, signed for Lila. Ella found herself leaving work earlier, delegating more, prioritizing family dinners and weekend outings over endless meetings and networking events. One perfect May afternoon, nearly a year after their first meeting, Jack suggested a return to the beach where it had all begun. The children raced ahead. Noah now fluent in sign language, the two of them communicating in their special hybrid of signs, words, and private jokes. Jack took Ella's hand as they walked along the shore, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the sand. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" he asked. If Noah hadn't sat down next to Lila that day. Ella squeezed his hand. "I try not to. It frightens me to think we might never have met." They stopped where the children were constructing an elaborate sand fortress, complete with moat and shell decorations. When Lila and Noah were sufficiently absorbed in their project, Jack turned to face Ella, his expression suddenly serious. "I have something to ask you," he said, his hands simultaneously forming the signs. Then, to her complete surprise, he knelt in the sand before her. "Ella Thompson, will you marry me?" Ella's laugh bubbled up through her tears, her hands forming the response without hesitation. "Yes." The children looked up at Ella's laugh, immediately understanding what had happened. They abandoned their sandcastle, rushing over to envelope the adults in a group hug. Noah grabbed a stick, drawing an enormous heart in the wet sand, while Lila clapped her hands in silent joy. Their wedding took place on that same beach 3 months later. A simple ceremony with just a few close friends and colleagues in attendance. Ella wore a flowing ivory dress that danced in the ocean breeze, her feet bare in the sand. Jack stood tall in a light linen suit, Noah beside him as best man, proudly bearing the rings. Lila walked down the makeshift aisle scattering flower petals, her face alight with happiness. The officiant spoke both aloud and in sign language, ensuring every word was accessible to all. When it came time for vows, Jack and Ella expressed their promises in both spoken words and flowing signs, a perfect symbol of the bridge they'd built between worlds. As the sun began to set over the ocean, casting golden light across the gathering, the newly formed family of 4 stood together at the water's edge. Noah and Lila splashed in the gentle surf while Jack wrapped his arms around Ella from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked simply. Ella turned in his embrace, no words necessary, as she signed her response. Complete. 4 hearts that had been broken in different ways had found their way to each other on this beach. Through hands that spoke when voices couldn't, through patience and understanding, through the courage to be vulnerable, they had created something beautiful from their separate sorrows. A family defined not by blood or circumstance, but by love in its purest, most healing form.